Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today at Kingston Christian Fellowship. We are so excited to get into today. We're going to be looking at Moses and the burning bush. But today I want to open up with this. We've been talking a lot about God's involvement and participation in our lives. We don't want to have a Christianity or a religion it's even tough mentioning those words, but we want to talk about relationship with God. That's what it is. God is a person. He is a person. You can have a relationship with him. You can talk to him. You can hear his thoughts. You can know his heart. He wants to interact and engage. He wants to participate in our lives, and not just the big things, but even the small things too. And so, it's my opinion that God didn't simply give us marching orders and then stand afar off to see how we do. The Bible is chock full of verses that talk about our union with him and our communion with him and the relationship that he desires for us, right? We've talked about acts, and we've talked about wait until you are endued with power from on high, right? That's something that we've talked about lately, that talks about relationship and God's involvement and participation and his power working in our lives. And we've talked a lot about not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord, right? We run out of might, we run out of power, but it's by the Spirit of God that we're going to accomplish his purposes in the earth today. So, here's a great example. There are millions and millions and millions of marriages in the world today. However, not all of them are healthy. Just because you call it a marriage doesn't dictate the condition of that relationship, correct? And we've been brought into a marriage with God. We've been brought into a communion, an intimate relationship with God, but not all relationships are the same. So do you know the difference between a healthy and an unhealthy marriage or relationship? It's the time spent. It's the conversation. It's the exchange, the interaction. Every interaction and engagement with the other person is a deepening of relationship. It's a knowing them better. Time spent helps you get to know the other person better. And it's the same with God. He's brought us into relationship. That's the grace of God, that he's brought us into communion, into union. But now we get to enjoy a lifelong journey of participating in encounters and interactions with him. And, I always say you can't spend time with somebody like God and not be impacted or influenced in an incredibly positive way. He is so good and he is so kind. So look, today we're going to look at Exodus chapter 3. I'm just going to read a few verses for you, but this is Moses and the burning bush, right? Verse 1 says this: Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Interesting place where the burning bush happens, eh? There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. Verse 4, very important. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. If you skip across to verse 13, it says, Moses said to God, Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, What is his name? Then what shall I tell them? And verse 14 says, God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. Awesome portion of scripture. Awesome story. I want to look very quickly at Moses' life up until this point, okay? What condition is Moses' heart in? And it's very important to understand where he is in his journey and where his heart may be positioned at this time, right? So Moses grows up in Pharaoh's household. Awesome, like just that whole story of the way that came to be, and the experience that must have been for Moses to grow up in that household. And of course he sees the slavery of his people, and he's really saddened by what he sees, right? He really cares for his people, and God sees his heart. I know that, and Moses is saddened, and he sees an Egyptian um, beating one of the Jews. And so he kills the Egyptian and he flees to Egypt, right? And so, incredible life events, some trauma, some things going on here in his life. He finds himself in this foreign land. And chapter 2 verse 22 says this. It says that he named his child, all right? Moses names his child Gershom, which means I've become an alien in a foreign land. Now look, no matter what you're going through in life, it's a whole nother level to start naming your children what's going on in your life. I mean, think about that for a second. He names his child after the misery that he is experiencing in his life. That's wild, right? Verse 23 says this: during that long period, look, his time in Midian, it wasn't short. If I'm writing a book and I need to explain that this long period of time is making an impact, or that it's long enough that I need to mention it in the book, it's a long time. All right. So Moses finds himself as an alien in a foreign land for a long time. And I don't know where you are today. Maybe you felt like you've been in a foreign land, like you haven't been yourself, or things in your life just haven't been clicking or coming along. Look, there's hope. I'm telling you, be encouraged by this message today. All right, keep on listening. Right. So Moses, he goes from growing up in the palace to shepherding in the desert, shepherding a flock in the desert. Look, that's quite a contrast, and it may look like his life is going backwards, right? Most people are trying to aim for the palace and head towards the palace, right? But it looks like his life is going backwards. And look, again, if that's you today, keep on listening. Okay, there's hope, there's encouragement, there's good news for you. Just as a side note, King David also tended flocks before the fulfillment of his destiny. Seems like there's something in there about God, tending God's sheep, tending God's flock, right? His herd, right? Tending whatever animal it may be. There's this care and concern. There's this element of God's preparation for your life and the journey he takes us to. So very interesting. And maybe this season in Moses' life was preparation for what was about to happen. And you could probably take the word maybe out of there. This was preparation for Moses for the fulfillment of his destiny. I mean, he's about to lead millions of people out of Egypt. He's about to see his heart's desire happen, the freedom of his people. And it looks like he's going backwards, but really he's just being prepared for the grand finale, which is awesome. So let's keep going, right? I want to talk about encountering God, because that's what this story is about. It's about the burning bush. It's about Moses's encounter with God in the bush. Look, many times in the Bible, God just shows up. Right, he's not called upon. There's not a warning he's coming. Many times he just shows up. Like the heavens are rend, and an angel shows up and just starts speaking. Right, a lot of times God just shows up and interrupts what's going on. But this time, and this is very important, this time was a little different. It wasn't the same as all of these other times. Look, God didn't just show up in the desert out of nowhere and say, Moses, listen to me. All right, there's another level to this story. There's something else that is happening, and I want to say that it is very important what is happening here. Look, we know that God wanted to speak to Moses. And we know that God wanted to give him a mission. We know that God was preparing this man before he released him to fulfill the purposes of God. And so God didn't just show up. He first provided a mystery to see how Moses would respond. He provided a distraction to see how Moses would respond. I believe this was a test of Moses' heart. See, I believe that us folks that love God so much, I believe our hearts are positioned in such a manner that we're looking for where God is going to show up, that we are looking to see where is God acting, where is God moving, what is God saying, and our eyes are looking, our ears are attentive, our heart is positioned. And when Moses sees this mystery, I'm wondering if he thought, maybe this is God. I have to go and check it out. Like maybe this is God interacting. I've got to go see what's going on here, right? So God provides this mystery and elicits a response from Moses. Now, I believe there's a glaring question here in this instance, right? It says, God was in the bush, and if Moses didn't go over to the bush, would God still have spoken to him? Right? If Moses didn't go over to the bush, if he just looked and then kept tending his flock, right, would God have spoken to him? Moses' willingness to step away from what he was doing may have been the difference between having this encounter with God and not. Moses' heart position to be able to step away may have been the difference between God speaking and not speaking. Look, Moses had responsibility, and start to parallel this with your own life. Moses had responsibility. He was at work, right? He's tending the flock. He's a busy guy. He's on the clock, right? He's got a routine, a schedule, and yet his heart was still positioned to inquire about what was going on here on the mountain of God. Very important to note that, right? It's the place it's going to happen, right? He goes to the far side of the desert, close to the mountain of God. I mean, just look at the position of Moses' heart. I'm going to go towards the mountain of God just to see if God's up to something, right? Just inquiring about what God is doing. Excuse me. And so, the question is, was there still a space in Moses' heart that was ready to look for God's involvement and participation in his life and in his ministry? We know his heart was battling some things. He'd had a tough road, and you may have too. But is your heart still positioned? Are you still looking for where God may be participating and leading your life in the future? Because the grand finale, I'm telling you this right now, the grand finale is around the corner for your life. The fulfillment of your vision and your mission is right around the corner. So look, Moses' response was incredibly important, right? Because verse 4, I read it to you, says this: when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush. Moses took a step and God responded, right? That's relationship. It takes two, right? And so, sometimes God takes a step and we respond. God set the burning bush. Moses responds and God speaks. I mean, this incredible dance of relationship is just so beautiful. But our hearts being positioned to respond and to look for where God is acting is so very important. Look, only when Moses had come close did God begin to speak. What an incredible point. Only when Moses had come close did God begin to speak. When Moses responded to something God was doing, all of a sudden God started pouring out all this communication. Sometimes we just have to get closer to the fire. Sometimes we just have to respond and initiate and get in there and just ask God some questions. What are you doing? What are you up to? God, I'm looking for you. God is looking for our response. So vitally important. Look, I took a course in university called Sacred Space and Pilgrimage, and I don't remember a whole lot from that course, but I do remember the main theme. Sacred Space and Pilgrimage talked about journeying in your faith to a religious location. Now, look, we all journey to church on Sundays, and maybe you have a special place that you pray and you journey to that location and whatnot. But what this course taught is that the expectation of your heart grows as you journey. You don't go somewhere without expecting that you're going to be impacted or have an experience. I go to Walmart expecting to buy groceries, and my expectations pretty high, and that's why I make the journey. And we journey to places, and when we intentionally journey, there's an expectation in us that we're going to have an experience, or we wouldn't journey to begin with, right? And so talking about Moses and how Moses meets with God, and intentionality and going over to the burning bush, and an expectation that God likes to meet. There's also this element of God meeting us in a foreign land, right? Moses finds himself in a foreign land and he's journeying across the desert, but God was just setting him up for an encounter. God was just getting him away, maybe away from home, or away from the routine, getting him out into this place so that he could meet with him in private. Some of the most powerful experiences and encounters I've had with God have been at summer camps. God's taken me out into foreign lands, places I've never been before, out of the routine, and that's where he's met with me. We often travel to conferences or book conferences on weekends, or have services outside of the normal schedule, because sometimes when you come on Sunday mornings, your heart's like, well, it's Sunday, this is what I do, and the routine ruins your expectation to meet with God, right? It's not just another Sunday, it's not just another meeting, it's not just going to be routine. And if you look at it that way, then odds are you may not meet with God, And so we have conferences, and we intentionally come to church on different days, expecting that we're going to meet with him, expecting that we're going to be impacted in a positive way. And this is what happened to Moses, right? Here we go. Just a couple more points, right? Fire is attractive, right? The Bible says that our God is a consuming fire. Now, look, fire can hurt and harm. It can burn, or it can refine, and it can keep warm, and it can purify metals and things like that, right? And so fire is attractive, it draws attention, and the fire of the burning bush drew Moses' attention. And God puts these things in our life to draw our attention, to draw us to himself, and his fire as a consuming fire is to keep us warm. It's a good kind of fire, not the fire that harms. So, a question today is, do you walk towards the fire, or do you walk away from it? Do you walk towards our God, who is a consuming fire, to have interaction and participate in relationship, or do you go the other way? Do you just practice a religion? Do you just read the Bible to know the words, but not know the person who wrote the words, who communicated the words, right? It's real relationship with a real God that is alive and well today. Okay, last point, here we go, are the encounters. All right, so Moses encounters God God. And that's where the difference comes. That's where the change comes. There's so much that happens in these encounters, and that is why we promote them so much. Face to face with God, heart to heart with God. Get in your prayer closet, talk with him in the car, talk with him at Walmart. Position your heart in front of him. Why? Because these encounters are life changing. Look at this encounter that Moses had. God starts communicating and pouring out all this information. He starts talking about mission and vision and direction, and he starts giving Moses a direction about the salvation of millions, about the freedom of millions of God's people being loosed from the slavery of Egypt. All this is in this encounter. All of this planning is here in this encounter, and that's why it's so important to have that relationship with God where the communication flows freely. But the most important thing about these encounters is that you get to know God. Look, God says this right at the beginning of the encounter. He communicates who he is to Moses. I am the God of your father, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He introduces himself. He reveals himself. He shows you who he is, what he's made of, what he cares about. He shows his character in these encounters and experiences. God reveals who he is, and we get to know him on a deeper level. He reveals himself. And of course, I read you verse 14. He says, tell Israel, I am who I am. I am who I am. Another level, another facet of knowing God, another name of God is being revealed in these encounters. Look, I encourage you today. This is such an important season for the church. Position your heart, inquire, have your eyes open, have your ears open to see what God is doing, to hear what God is saying, because it's such an important season to do that. Dive in, get into your prayer closet, dive into relationship with God. He is such a blessing. We are so honored to know him in the way that we do. Look, I'm praying for you. We're believing the best for your life. We're cheering you on. God bless you. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We'll see you next time.